What is up, everybody? I'm Ryan Thomas, the host of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. In case you have not checked out what has most recently gone on the Thomas Take, the latest episodes of the Thomas Take, as Deshaun Vincent joined me yesterday as we previewed the 2016 Dallas Cowboys. Also, Brandon Knapp and myself previewed the Detroit Lions, along with Sal Angelo and myself previewing the Buffalo Bills 2016 season this past week as well. Really enjoyed having the wide variety of guests on the show, and that will continue over the course of the football season and for the course of this show. Guests will be on the Thomas Take, but this episode is once again the vintage style of the Thomas Take, myself talking to you, the listeners, about the UFC 202 presser that went down today. Diaz versus McGregor 2, a press conference that was highly anticipated. Conor McGregor showed up 15 minutes late to the press conference, and the following, I'd say 5 to 8 minutes, were unlike anything I've seen throughout my time as a UFC fan. Throughout the entire time I've been a fan of mixed martial arts, this dates back to 2005, I've never seen a press conference end in the fashion that this one did, with Nate Diaz throwing a water bottle, which was ridiculous, to Conor McGregor throwing a can in a crowd of people. I think both of these guys should be fined for... Conor should be fined for being late to the press conference. Conor should be fined for throwing a can during a press conference in a crowd of people. What if that can hit a fan? That would not have been a good look. I also think Nate Diaz should be fined for leaving the press conference early. What casual fans don't understand about this sport is that the UFC would not be where it is today if they didn't have these type of promotional press conferences, and the fighters would not have the amount of press that they do without the press conference. The press conference needs to be made, and the fighters have to fulfill that obligation within their contract in order to promote the brand and to promote the sport and to promote their own career. The Diaz brothers have had instances where they don't want to promote themselves, they don't want to promote the sport, they don't want to partake in the press conferences, and obviously Conor McGregor has had his history of not wanting to partake in the UFC press conferences. Obviously that's why we are where we are today at UFC 202 rather than UFC 200. So I'm definitely just as shocked as everybody else. If you rewatch that press conference, you'll hear Dana White say to Conor, do not throw those cans, do not throw those cans. Conor, do not throw those cans. And he continued to anyway. He should be fined. Nate Diaz should be fined. This is not the first time that two guys made a huge scene at a UFC press conference. John Jones, Daniel Cormier, of course, the first that comes to mind. First occasion that this comes to mind. Tito Ortiz and Ken Shamrock, if you really want to go back and date yourself, that was a press conference that had an emphatic ending to it as well. And obviously the fight with Jason Mayhem Miller and Nick Diaz back in I believe it was the Elite XC or Strikeforce days, where the huge brawl ensued in the octagon. Nate Diaz was pretty pissed off that Conor was late to the press conference, I believe. I also believe Nate Diaz is sick of the press conferences as well, and he's just sick of all the press that surrounds this fight. But he has to deal with it, as Conor does as well. And that was not a good look for the UFC and for the sport of MMA to have basically a riot somewhat ensue once again during a press conference in which Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor are the main two fighters being talked about. Also, in today's news, the Buffalo Bills defensive tackle Marcell Dareus was suspended for the first 4 games of the 2016 season due to a positive, due to basically marijuana. That's basically all it is. Marijuana. The NFL has its set of rules. Roger Goodell has his set of rules. Until those rules change, the NFL and the teams within the league have to abide by them. As ridiculous as they are, those are the rules within the National Football League. Roger Goodell does not want players smoking marijuana. He wants players to obey the Goodell law. And Mr. Big Stuff, Marcell Dareus, did not do that. So he will be suspended for the first 4 games. A crushing blow, once again, to the Buffalo Bills defense. If you have not checked out my column on myfantasysportstalk.com, I previewed the AFC East division as the Buffalo Bills. I rated them 3rd at 7-9 for the 2016 season. They could quite possibly be worse than that with the 4-game suspension of Marcell Dareus. That's a huge loss to the Buffalo Bills defensive line, to the Buffalo Bills defense, and obviously the Buffalo Bills in general as an organization. It looks pretty bad last year, giving Marcell Dareus, giving him that contract, and here we are. He's suspended. So the Buffalo Bills defense has had a hodgepodge of injuries. Corey Bierman was signed to replace Ike Enemkpali, who's there to replace Manny Lawson, Manny Lawson was there to replace Shaq Lawson. So basically their fourth stab at having a starting defensive end / linebacker this offseason alone. Shaq Lawson, then Manny Lawson replaced Shaq Lawson, then Ike Enemkpali replaced Manny Lawson, and now Corey Bierman will replace Ike Enemkpali. It's just a bad turn of events for the Buffalo Bills in the last 3-4 weeks of the season, of the off season, really since training camp started, with Reggie Ragland going down, tearing his ACL. He is now replaced by both David Hawthorne and Brandon Spikes. I like those additions to the Bills. I think Brandon Spikes is a veteran guy. He was a Buffalo Bill in the last year of his playing career, which was in 2014, and he liked playing here. I like Brandon Spikes a lot, but I don't think Brandon Spikes is Reggie Ragland. I like David Hawthorne, being that he was a guy that was on the Saints. He played under the Rob Ryan scheme a little bit in New Orleans, so I like that in terms of a guy having that experience on the Buffalo Bills defense and the direction in which that defense is going in. Very, very interested to see how that pans out, but those two guys are not Reggie Ragland. So the Bills defense is in shambles, and their offense obviously could be in shambles at any given moment with a guy like Tyrod Taylor at quarterback and a starting wide receiver like Sammy Watkins, and even a running back like LaShawn McCoy. All 3 of those guys could easily get hurt at any given time. And we got to hope for the best as Bills fans, but I have to be a realist. I had a lot of people emailing me today saying, 7-9, really, Ryan? You're a Buffalo Bills fan. Sorry, guys. I have to call it like I see it, and this is how I see it. At least I have Miami going 5-11 for the 2016 season. At least the Buffalo Bills won't be last. I think they'll be 7-9 or 6-10, with or without Marcell Dareus. I'll say 6-10, maybe 5-11, but I think Miami will have that last spot in the AFC East. I don't think Miami is going in a positive direction in year one with Adam Gase as their head coach. Typically, year one under a head coach, there isn't immediate success, and there's way too many question marks for the Miami Dolphins for the Buffalo Bills to be ranked lower than them. There's question marks for the Bills as well, but I don't see that happening. I don't see Buffalo being worse than the Miami Dolphins.